Good morning, everyone. Right, this is new for me, right? So here we go. So I am John Qualls, president of Purposely, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about talent optimization. Kind of things I want to cover. I want to talk a little bit about the audience. I think that I'm talking to. I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey, how I kind of got involved in the cloud or whatever we're calling it today, and you'll know a little bit more about that. What actually is talent optimization? We call the 4 misalignments. The 3 amigos, right? The data, insight, decisions. We have a little gift for you and then some final thoughts. So I think I got about 30 to 35 minutes. I want to leave some time at the end to jump over into the other channel to answer any questions that might come up. But I'm really excited to talk to you guys today. And those who know me from my disaster recovery days, I mean, I've got my whole rig set up here, right? I'm ready to, I could tether, I could go to another machine. I'm all about business resiliency here. So let me make sure I start my little timer here. All right, so the audience, what I really believe what's out there really is today and tomorrow's, right? Business owners, executives, managers, teammates. That's who I'm kind of talking to today. And as I've thinking this through over the last 24, 48 hours based on what's been going on the last few weeks, I really wanted to kind of address all those audiences. So I'll try to weave that in as I'm walking through this. Who is not out there is anybody that's on an island or alone. I think that the day of a single person somewhere, hidden in a room, starting a company, by themselves is over. And it really does take a group and a team and a tribe, however you want to call that. And really that's what I want to talk about a little bit today. So a little bit about my journey. And wow, I feel like I'm on the back 9 of my journey, but share a little bit of that for you. I was in the military, in the Marine Corps, and actually it was there where I actually kind of got into IT, only because the fact that I knew how to type. And so did a great time there, maybe not so great time during the Gulf War, but did 6 years there in the military, got out, and I know some on here don't remember life before the internet, but I'm old enough to remember what that was like. And so I remember this new thing, the internet, and I was trying to figure out, how we were going to take advantage. I wanted to start a company associated with the internet. And I think we were doing database-driven websites. Was what we were doing back in there in the 90s with the internet. And then from the internet, then it became, and there's some on the call who remember this, and some I'm just trying to educate you of the history. But then we had these application service providers. That was the big thing, application service providers, providing applications, services over this new thing called the internet. And people lost their minds. And then we had the Y2K come up, and that was, it was going to be the end of the world. Kind of like, I feel like kind of what we're going through now, right? So, Y2K was going to happen and the new millennium, and the whole world was going to shut down. So, then from ASPs, it was like, people were putting all this stuff at their place, and then it became co-location was the big thing. And why would you have your own data center when you could co-locate it at one of these big web farms and some of those things? Then from co-location and web farms, it went to infrastructure as a service. Interesting, one of my teammates of a company, we actually put in infrastructure as a service in Wikipedia, and we thought it was going to be the big thing. And our friends at Amazon kind of ate our lunch a little bit there, but we did okay. But infrastructure as a service. And then it was, not infrastructure service, it was software as a service. So then it was SaaS companies and software as a service. And then somewhere along the way, instead of that, it became the cloud. I don't know who keeps control of these things, how we name the new technologies, but then it became the cloud. And then, so I had some companies associated with that. I had an opportunity to sell one of those a couple years ago, but then it was the cloud, and then now we have IoT and AI and machine learning and all these other pieces. But that's been kind of my journey over 25 years. And I tell you, the one thing I want you to know is that the change has always been the constant. And today it's cloud. I'm not sure what it will be in 5 years from now. The one thing I do know is that if you're going to be in this space, particularly in the technology space, you will be a lifelong learner. I think the skills that you have probably have about a 2-year shelf life. So it's constantly going to be learning new things, learning new ways of doing that. I feel like for me, the world has been always getting smaller and faster, right? So the world is always getting smaller. My other observation, over these, I keep saying 25 years, it might be 30 now, it's sneaking up on me. But you're going to keep running into the same fish in your fishbowl. It's amazing to me that the people I knew, and we would have drinks at some restaurant talking about this internet thing, and how now all of them are all CEOs or C-level executives at different companies. And that is definitely going to be part of your journey. But that change is going to be constant. But for me, the only true constant has always been the people. And I've always felt like I was, over this time, I was always kind of chasing the next thing and trying to understand where the market was going. And it was kind of like I was trying to play chess in the market. But if there was one thing I wish that I could talk to the young John Qualls at 20 years old or so coming into this space, an exciting space, it's always been exciting, solving problems with technology, was, when it comes to the people. I felt like for a long time, I looked at people, I think I was playing checkers when it came to how I looked at people versus the chess that I really kind of brought when I was thinking about where the market was going. And really is a tremendous opportunity. Well, I say you really need to understand the people opportunity in addition to where you're going to take the technology and where those things are going, what your strategy is going to be. And what I've observed over time, I'll never forget after the Y2K, and there was a big kind of bubble busted, and someone said, this e-business thing, I think it's just business, right? And I think they're right. And a lot of the things that we do, we want to get excited about the technology, but we got to keep remembering there is a business piece of it, and the one constant is the people and the ability to execute against that. And so we've seen lots of different names for what we do, and I really think in technology we solve problems, right, with technology. Sometimes anything that's for technology's sake doesn't seem to last. It seems like a lot of people lose money there. But what I observed, and I had an opportunity, I think, as Calvin may have mentioned in the opening remarks, to serve kind of 4 years in this coding boot camp, and to really see so many people kind of coming into our space and their excitement to get into it. But what I really started to see was this emerging framework in a space to really help kind of frame up how we look at talent, and how that's going to be, I believe, extremely strategic to how we move forward. And it's really going to be your ability on your talent is going to move your organization forward by more so than just your ability to understand the technology. So what is talent optimization, which is this new space? Actually, the first conference was actually this year. I think there's about 800 people. I like to think, I remember the time I went to this first conference for this company. It's called VMware or something. I don't know. I think there was maybe there was about 2,200 people or something the first year I went. And I do remember a few years later when I think there was they announced 19,000 people in the room. I'm not sure where it is today, but I feel like it's a groundswell in this new place of what is, is talent optimization. And if I could kind of put it in one graphic, to me, all of us, we have a business strategy and we have the results that we're trying to get out of it. And the piece we can't forget is it really is about the people in the middle. And the talent optimization is really a model, an approach to how do you design, hire, inspire, and diagnose the people in between your strategy and the results that you're trying to get to. And I like to think this not only as an organization, but I also think about this from teams, right? So let me kind of break each one of these down so I get a better feel for it. So that first one is the design. Another thing, as a founder of companies, this is another thing I wish I would have learned early on. But really, when you think about companies, or even initiatives or even teams sometimes, there's really 5 stages. And there's the raw startup. Wow, we got this idea and we're going to take it to the market. Usually really excited about it. And then the market slaps you around with what the real problem is. But you have a problem you want to solve and you think you have a way of solving it. So that's a raw startup. And then you actually kind of get into that emerging value. We actually have people who may actually write you a check to solve that problem, and maybe more than one, right? So that kind of this emerging value proposition comes out. And then you kind of get a dozen of those or so, and then you want to start to grow, and not only maybe more companies, more verticals, more geographical locations, but you want to move into this growth phase. And then at some point, every time that problem comes up, you're always at the table of consideration, right? So you become established. And then, those who may be familiar with microfiche, then this great thing that you had might go into a decline mode, right? So, but, for me as a young entrepreneur, one of the things I think is important to understand these stages of companies is that they require a different style of leadership. I've actually put in here, raw startup is about being creative, right? You have to move quickly and based on what the market is. And then you move to a directive type of leadership when you have a small team and you're trying to grow that team out. And then you move to delegatory because, so many times I've seen businesses kind of plateau because they can't be as big as the leader. And at the end of the day, if you're trying to create a growth company, you need to bring in other people who can lead and delegate that authority to them, right, to make this organization bigger than who you are. Established requires kind of a governance or risk mitigation type of leadership. And then obviously decline is all about efficiency. There's actually a company out there still doing microfiche, and I think they've got that thing squeezed down as tight as it could be. But for me, it was really about what those stages are and understanding that I may not be involved in that. It's going to be a different type of team as I create these organizations, right? So different team makeups. Right? So you have to think about that not only as leaders, but also as teammates and others, right? One of the biggest transitions I've always seen is when you go from an early stage company to a little bit further along, is people go from wearing 5 hats down to 1. And actually the emotional loss that they go through is pretty interesting. So the second part of that design, so then hire, right? So, we tend to hire for what I call, we hire for competency and then we fire for behaviors. So I think, it really is about the head, the heart, and the briefcase. And to us, it is the head. And I want to be really clear, the head around cognitive is not about how smart you are. I think sometimes we get too enamored with that. It's not your IQ, but your absorption rate. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But and then heart, culture fit, behaviors, values, emotional intelligence. Your personality's been the same since you've been in 6th grade. You've been seasoning that thing. But it's really your emotional intelligence is what's really either held you back or turbocharged you into your career, right? So some of those things. And then there obviously is that briefcase, your body of work that you've done, right? And where you are on that journey. Next one being around inspire, right? So you hired them, but now you got to inspire them. And to me, I see young people holding leaders more accountable to the job satisfaction, career pathing, team dynamics, and how teams go together are more important than ever. Diversity counts. And when I say diversity, I don't mean just diversity of minorities. I mean diversity of thought, right? Excuse me. Excuse me. And I think young people, and I think all of us want to be invested in, right? So grow me, particularly for, the new people coming in, this real intensity of wanting to be grown. Skills training, I spent 4 years what I thought was solving the skills gap, which is absolutely can be closed. But, it's interesting when I go around and I talk to companies and I ask them about their best employees and where they came from. A lot of times there's someone that came in through an alternative way into the organization and they just seek responsibility and they just really invested in their skills, right? And it's like the ones that we built are the best ones that we have. The ones that we bought have some other challenges, and I'll talk about some of that in a minute. But also grow me about being part of a community. And, this whole thing of going from a job to a career to a vocation is really, really important. And the last piece of this framework really is the diagnose. And I've always felt like technologists have always been investing in this space. I see so often we invest so much in the symptoms of the problems and not the causes. I always ask, you remember the 5 whys, right? So root cause analysis, the 5 whys of why it happened. So often I see us put policies in place for symptoms or incidents instead of actually getting the root to the causes, right? So measuring engagement and trends within the organization and people, right? And then a lot of times if we could have a little crystal ball, a little bit of insight into what things are going to look like, we can invest a little bit more on prevention versus reaction. More so than I look at what's been going on the last 2 weeks or last month with the virus and everything else, right? You always wish there should have been some investment in some prevention because the reaction looks like it's going to be pretty expensive for us. So that seems the case. So that is talent optimization framework. This design, hire, inspire, and diagnose the problems around the people between the strategy, right? So aligning your talent strategy with your people strategy. I always said in technology, sometimes we get pretty enamored with the things that we built. And so I have this kind of phrase that you have to sell the solution or sell the problem you're solving, not the solution you're selling. Make sure I say that again, right? So you want to sell the problem you're solving, not the solution you're selling. And when I really look at talent optimization, what are we actually solving? To me, a lot of the complexity we look around people is it really kind of comes down to these 4 big misalignments. And if you look at wherever any of you are on your journey, you're probably going to find that one of these or multiple one of these is where the big misalignment that caused the event or the transition from one organization to another. So we break it down with those 4, kind of what I call the 4 big misalignments. The first one is just this misalignment with the culture, right? Having trouble connecting with the company's culture, right? The culture is toxic. Misalignment with the job, the behavioral or cognitive abilities, right? Or doesn't really make that work for the job, right? You're in the wrong role. Misalignment with the team, right? Tensions, color interactions, they're not positive. And I want to break each one of these down a little bit more in detail. And then the last one is misalignment with managers. A lot of times I say people leave organizations because of the manager. And managers, having the skills and tools to be able to be good managers is important. I think mid-level manager investment has been something that we haven't done well as leaders, and we need to make a real investment there. So those are the 4 big misalignments. Let me kind of break down some of those a little more here. So culture. There's 2 types of cultures I've found, and I've been guilty of the first one. There's the culture that you allow, and then there's the culture that you craft. And the culture that you craft, culture is not the bean bags, the ping pong tables. And one of the things that I think organizations fall into is that their values is a place by the lobby that you visit, right? It's a list on the wall next to the lobby. Let me show you where our values are, and they're over here on this thing. I've always asked if your values within your organization, if you went to any employee in your organization, could they say them without standing in the lobby reading them off of that? You really want your values to be walking around. And to me, it's, from a leadership standpoint or even as a teammate, when do you know that you have culture is right? And to me, that's when decisions, interactions, problems, solutions are aligned to those values. And importantly, is that those things drive the business even when the leader is not in the room. And the leaders they're the responsible to holding those values, accountability of those values. But, to me, I always want to see those values being exercised when I'm not around or other managers are not around. And that's really where growth of individual and organization happen, is when those things happen, when you have a problem with a client, right? Or a tough negotiation, and you can really fall back on those. So that's really how I see the misalignment of culture. The second one is around this job fit. When times are great, right? People are hiring really, really fast. But to me, that always comes with a back end expense, right? So it's better to hire harder to manage easier, right? So often I see sometimes we kind of settle on hires, and I think sometimes people take jobs for the wrong reasons. And excuse me, this misalignment of job, and if any of you have gone to the store, and I think lately I've gone to the store a lot. If you ever go to the store and you grab one of those carts and you start pushing it away, and one of the wheels is a little off, right? It's kind of going like that. And you're like, oh, I'm not going to be here very long, right? So you kind of go down one row, and then you're like, well, the hell with this, right? Because it's just driving you crazy. And then you end up going and go getting another cart. I really feel that when you take a bad job or you're in a bad role for the wrong reasons, it's like you're driving that thing and it's out of wobble. And it's kind of like a car that's out of alignment. And you can drive a car out of alignment, but there's an expense for that, right? It's really tough. What's interesting to me is or not interesting, but what tends to happen is you keep driving it that way, and eventually you're going down the road at 70 miles an hour, and you're going to blow a tire, and then all kinds of collateral damage. And that's what I see with people in their careers, midlife crises, right? Marriages and affairs and bankruptcies and career disruption, right? Because they've been kind of riding this, haven't been really aligned to the job that they're in, right? So I always encourage people to look at things as a tour of duty. Maybe that's because I was in the military, but really going in and saying, hey, I'm going to go in and, the time of being at a company for 40 years and getting a gold watch at the end, I don't think is with us anymore. But really looking at this tour of duty mentality, taking a job 2 to 3 years, what do we want to accomplish, check in annually, and the ability to have really smart re-up discussions, to make sure that there's an alignment. I just think it's worked for me, and the people I know that take that approach tends to serve them better, right? So it really comes back down to this head, heart, and briefcase, right? Do they have a cognitive ability for the role? Is their heart, is their behaviors and EQ, cultural alignment? And then, what are the things they bring to the table, skills? And I think as an organization, if you're not really tripling down on building your skills within your team, you're missing out, right? Because that's going to be really important. Transition more to the team here. Let me see how we're doing on time. Teams, right? So this misalignment around the team. I've always felt like team dynamics, there should be some tension there. There's always seems to be some tension between sales and delivery, right? Those always seem to happen. But it's really, can those two, can that tension make a better team and a better organization versus destroying or breaking it down, right? The diversity of thought and style. It's just interesting. I was at the coding academy, and we actually did some teams where they were like all male teams, all female teams, and then mixed male and female teams. It was really interesting. The all male teams would tackle a problem and do 15 pushes in a day, and the all women team would do 2, and but the 2 would work. By the way, the 15, 2 would work, but the other ones didn't. But it was the mixed team who usually put 5 or 6 in per day and really had a better product at the end, right? So that's just, gender diversity. But I think diversity of thought and style is super important when it comes to team dynamics, right? So, there's a lot of an investment when we think about engagement and empathy. Empathy and trust comes from knowing and respecting our unique abilities and contributions that we're bringing to the team, right? There's going to be conflict, right? But there still has to be that level of respect. And that comes with an understanding of each other and of teammates, right? And the last one, so Simon Sinek, I think, does this, but I really appreciate the way he was able to articulate it. But it is, I saw a little flag here. But he talks about, if the vertical, if this is performance, right? So 0 is low, no performance, to 10, high performance. And on the y-axis is no trust to high trust. What we all want is high performance, high trust, right? That's really what we're looking for over here. And, but, to me, I will take a lower performer, high trust, than just a high performer with no trust. I think they call this where the assholes are, right? So sorry, but I believe that the high performer that no one trusts, right? That's where they tend to find themselves, right? And it's not that they're bad. They just found themselves in there and they need to be let out of it. But sometimes you need to subtract to add to the organization because you can't grow it because you're allowing this bad thing to happen over here. So yeah, a high performer that can't be trusted is worse than a medium performer who is completely trusted, right? I think that's really important when it comes to teams. And last one, manager and leadership development and this misalignment, right? So often, particularly in technology, do I see we take a tremendous contributor, technical contributor, and we believe that the next thing for them is to make them a manager. And what happens is that maybe that's just not their thing. And then somehow we've created a culture where they're not allowed to go back and be that contributor. So their only way out is to leave, right? And it's a great friend that in their organization, when you go from a contributor, the technical side to the management side, it's called a 2-year tour of duty. And you don't get a pay raise, but you get this 2 years. In the 2 years, it either works out for you, and if it doesn't, you get the opportunity to go back and be a contributor without the shame that somehow that you lost, right, or that you failed, right? So it's definitely something you should think about as organizations, right? I think one of the things is managing consistently doesn't mean that everyone is managed the same, and really knowing different people and their behavior profiles, I think, is really important. Good leadership, it is exhausting, right? It's just not easy, right? There's this, I used to think, man, it was so much easier doing the technology than it is doing the people. The technology, I kind of, does exactly what I tell it to do pretty much, right? But the people always seems to be moving around, right? So, building people, not fiefdoms, that always pays over the long run. And then, I was in the Scouts when I was younger, but I think as a manager or a leader, manage like the Scouts, they always say, leave it better than you found it. I think that's really important. And then, good managers take care of their people. I like to say the other side of it, or the people take care of the manager, right? They either leave or they create the pressure. They're saying this person's not getting it done for us, right? So that's really important. So how are we doing on time here? Yeah, so there we go. So to me, I think all of us are on this big journey. It's interesting, a lot of times we hear companies that get sold or bought, and people say, oh, wow, they're overnight success. And I have yet to find one that if you look under the covers, there was a 8-year, 10-year journey from raw startup to this big exit that everyone's excited about. There really is no overnight successes, right? It's hard work. And at the end of the day, there are these, I call the 3 amigos, right? There's you, the individual, the affiliations that you have, right? Which might be your college. It might be, it's the companies that you're part of. It might be the groups that you're part of. And more importantly also is that third one is the advisors that you have, the coaches, the managers, right? People advising you on your personal journey, your professional journey. It's really these 3 groups. And I've always felt, and a lot of things from a purposely standpoint was, how can we gather some data and use some science? I think so often I've kind of shot from the hip, and sometimes that worked out, and sometimes it was pretty spectacular failure, right? But can we gather some data to capture some insights to make informed decisions, not only personally but professionally as an organization and as individuals? It's interesting. I remember, I've always tried to tie some of this back to the technology side, but, monitoring is kind of worthless, right? I never forget, I was looking at some dashboard at one of the organizations I was part of, and they had I think an F5 load balancer. It was kicking out 2,000 errors a day. And I was like, holy cow, is that thing going down or what? And they're like, no, it barks like that all the time. And what I mean by the monitoring is worthless is that the monitoring isn't the answer. It's the interpretation of the data and the actions that you're going to take with it. That's where the really value happens. Actually, that's where the really expensive part of it is, right? Is that interpretation and the actions that you take with it. And that's where we really see here. And I really felt like I spent all this time in technology, and now have this opportunity to kind of give back on the people side and kind of create an organization that does those things, right? Gathering data, capturing insights, and making these informed decisions. So, well, kind of the gift I'll give you today, purposely doesn't sell to individuals. But if you go to app.purpose.ly, you can go and get a kind of free Purposely account. It's free for individuals. There's no cost there. There's an opportunity to get some feedback around your emotional intelligence markers, behaviors, personality, some of those things. There's a person there that you can reach out to, and they'd be happy to talk to you about it. Again, there's really no fees associated with that. To me, I've captured a lot of insight over my career, but I never really had them in one place. So you'll have the ability to do that, have it all in one place and share that. And then obviously we love and be humbled to work with organizations that kind of optimize their talent and kind of use this framework to really start addressing culture, job, team, and manager. So I think I'm kind of wrapping up here on my time here. I want to make sure I left about 10 minutes for anybody that wanted to ask some questions. But, here's where I think at the end of the day, we're all on this journey, and you need to find your me. And by finding your me, you can really find your we. And I kind of like it in that order. I think a lot of times, sometimes we find our we, and then we become dependent on something we don't actually know who we are. So, at the end of the day, when you enjoy how the company that you work, how decisions are made, and that your contribution is appreciated, and that you work with others that actually make you better, and you enjoy working with them, and they challenge you and they make you better, and you have an organization and a leader that invest in your personal growth, that's what, why would you ever leave, right? And what's wrong with any of that? And I think if that's what you invest in and you're able to get to that place, it's going to be great for us, and it's going to be great for the organizations that you're part of. And that was really why I felt like the future growth of cloud is really going to be the people, and don't forget it. So thank you. Here you go, Calvin.
John. We actually have a couple questions from the chat room, so I'll go ahead and ask those of you right now. So
okay.
We've got the first one here is from Shane. If I can find my mouse and move this thing over. How do you feel about 40-hour weeks during the startup process for your employees? Do you expect everybody to go way above and beyond on that front? Do you feel everybody should be a 40-hour expectation that starts from the top, including yourself?
So raw startup, I guess I'm kind of always been a 50 to 60 hour person, no matter what stage of the organization is. And I've always felt, though, that regardless, that you kind of have to, as a startup, which requires a certain type of crazy person and crazy people, right? But there is, like, what are you trying to get done, right? What are you trying to solve? And I don't know if that's a 9 to 5 where you think about it, but I think the really thing is 40 hours enough? And I do believe that 40 hours is enough. I just don't think that it's a 9 to 5. There's a thing I call GAF, Geek After 5. And I promise you, a lot of people in this conference are gaffers, right? And these are people who are thinking about the problems that they're solving with technology, and it doesn't end at 4:59 every day. And these are the people that show up at the meetups in the evenings, right? They're at these conferences. They're making contributions, right, into code sets and things like that, right? So I've always been a gaffer. So I never kind of put it in a 9 to 5. But I think as a raw startup, there's a lot of creativity that needs to happen there, and you need everybody kind of leaning in and willing to wear lots of hats. So I think it's more about lots of hats. The effort, the effort and drive, I think, is just depending on the space you're in and how poor you are, and how desperate you get, and so things like that. But I think it can be done. I know for me, it's kind of like a 7 days a week. I'm thinking about it at that stage. Later on at value prop and growth stage, I try to put a little more balance in my life. But in the beginning, I'm usually kind of all hands on deck all the time. And that wears on you a little bit. So I don't know if I answered this question, but I think it can be done in 40 hours, but it's definitely not a 9 to 5 mentality.
Right. I think it's hard to account for those gap hours. Like, they aren't put on a timesheet typically, but the people are definitely getting, the organizations are getting value out of it.
Yeah.
Again, another question from Shane, which is, what specific types of roles are must-have roles to hire as your core team before you build around them?
So the question is, what are those core roles?
Yeah, what kind of core roles must you hire as you build your core team before you build around them?
Yeah, so I think if you think about the 5 stages of a company, right? So there's those original founders, and they're going to be wearing 5 or 6 different hats. So it's very difficult to kind of get that role nailed down. But as you start to go to value proposition, which is where you really start to flesh out your team, I think there's 3 things that are really important at that stage, right? The first one is revenue, and the second one is revenue, and the third one is revenue, right? Revenue solves a lot of problems, right? When you have revenue, and cash to build out that team. So I think as you get that value prop, it really is having that, the sales and marketing piece becomes really important. And those are real core pieces around revenue. You can't cut your way to success. That was my little 35-minute mark. But you can't cut your way to success, right? So I think that revenue and the sales and marketing, as you start to build out your team, when you hit that value prop stage, that's super, super important. Before that, right, it's really about people are just super, someone says, what is purpose, right? And, you've heard me talk about Ikigai maybe before, but at the end of the day, when you're good at something and you point at a problem that you care about, right, that's where passion comes from. The world needs and the world willing to reward you. I think every startup at the end of the day is you got to get a group of people who are good at something that can solve a problem that they care about, that the world needs, and are willing to compensate them for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
When all those come together, it's like, I can't even believe I'm working, right? It's, that's what real purpose is, I think. So.
Yeah. We've got another question from Maria. Do you have any resources or articles or anything about hiring for the ability to learn versus IQ to pass on to someone who does not share that opinion?
Well, there's this company called Purposely that has a really interesting approach to that, that actually measures all those things. So I would encourage you to go to app.purposely and be able to chat with someone there. But at the end of the day, when I say we're measuring cognitive, intelligence is like the size of your sponge, right? And we all have different size sponges, right? Different when it comes to intelligence. But what we really care about is the absorption rate of that sponge, right? How fast. I don't have, you can be the smartest person in the world, but I don't have 18 months for you to come up to speed, right? I need that to happen in 3, 4, 6 months, right? Or even weeks for some, right? So sometimes they bring a briefcase in to solve that, to help with that absorption. But how can you measure that, particularly with young people as you're bringing them into the organization, right? They got these really skinny resumes. They're probably wicked smart, but they have no experience, right? So the ability to measure that cognitive learning capacity, right, is the piece that we measure versus IQ, right? So again, it's not the size of the sponge, it's the absorption rate is what you're trying to measure. So that's how we do it.